From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
That's a wrap for Rhode Island's 2024 legislative session. After years of debate, lawmakers revamped the law that regulates police officer discipline and took more steps to try and alleviate the state's housing crisis. But as always, there were losers too, like the Secretary of State's push for a permanent state archives building and efforts to increase access to government records. We break it all down with our guest this week on Newsmakers, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Lou DiPalma. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. On the second half of the program, a reporter's roundtable. We're going to break down the legislative session. That's just what we're going to do with our first half guest, Lou DiPalma. He's the Senate Finance Committee Chairman. Chairman, welcome back to the program. I know it was a late night, so we appreciate you coming.
What time did you leave the State House, Chairman?
About 2:15.
Wow.
Hazard pay.
Yes. And we are recording this the following Friday morning, so thank you again. I want to start with the budget. Look, lawmakers are touting a lot of things in the near $14 billion budget. Money for retirees, increase in Medicaid,
correct,
reimbursement, education, a bunch of increased spending. Rhode Island was already facing a, roughly almost $250 million budget deficit next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Could be $300 million or more now with all this extra spending. How should the governor close that deficit?
I think if you look at what was done as it relates to some of the big muscle movers, one of those was Medicaid rates. About $160 million into Medicaid rates, but about $60 to $70 million was general revenue. We saved a fair amount of money in our previous, if you looked at the May Revenue Estimating Conference and Case Law Estimating Conference, most of that money got saved in the Health and Human Services areas, in the area of Medicaid. So we basically reapportioned that money over to these services because it's critical for those programs to exist. At the end of the day, it was the right thing to do there, and we'll see as we move back and move forward in January, whoever comes back in January, what the governor gets his budget from the agencies in the September timeframe, how we move forward. But I think we're on a pretty good footing with regards to what we put in place, what's going to come back into the budget. One of the things we did as part of the Medicaid rates is looked at the dynamic side of things. We very rarely look at the income side, and over the time this is going to be, it's $160 million. Majority of it's federal money coming into the state economy, and that's going to come back into the state economy in sales tax, income tax.
Is that the answer to you think
yes.
Is the economy will grow
yes.
and offset do you anticipate a budget deficit greater than $250 million next year?
Uncertain yet. I haven't looked at it. Anybody who knows me, I'm an engineer, so I'm a facts and data context person. Until I go back and look, reevaluate where we are, I can't answer that question yes or no yet.
But, just one more question on the deficit, I guess. If, all these programs that lawmakers are touting, if based on current projections, there isn't nearly enough money to keep everything in place for next year, is it sort of a false promise? Because starting in January and then all through next year's session, you're all going to be even having to pare this back or raise taxes elsewhere to keep things as they are.
True. I think and I said this on the floor last night, and I served on the Senate Finance Committee with some phenomenal group of senators. Three, in fact, have been, amongst the three of them, 75 years in the General Assembly. But Senator Felag, many times, who's the second vice chair, we talk about the overall budget of $14 billion. But the real number to focus on is our general revenues, because that's what we're talking about from an income perspective. Income tax, sales tax, lottery are the three biggest sources of income. That's what we have to focus our numbers on, looking at what are we spending there, because federal money comes and goes. With regard to additional federal money, the tuition at URI, that's all in there. But the real focus needs to be on the general revenue side of things.
We obviously wanted to talk about the budget because of your position as head of the Finance Committee, but I do want to bring this up. One bill that you worked really hard on, but it failed to get traction, was reforming the state's Access to Public Records Act. Your legislation, in short, would have increased government transparency, full disclosure. I was a board member of the New England First Amendment Coalition, and NEFAC supported this bill. It didn't happen. Why?
Significant opposition. I'm always going to be respectfully direct. Significant opposition from the executive branch.
From the governor's office?
Yes.
And all the agencies.
Correct. That's when I say the executive branch, governor's office, agencies. And this is a journey I began with the New England First Amendment Coalition, the Access Rhode Island, Common Cause, ACLU, League of Women Voters, Press Corps. August of 2022, I reached out to won't say specifically who, but those two groups, and said, how do we do this? And he said, let's meet and do it. So in August of 2022, we began that journey. Significant opposition the first year. A little less, I guess, the first year. A lot more the second year, even after the bill was enhanced and improved, and meetings that we had over last summer and into the fall to make it better. I don't remember him, but I remember his quote, and he has a great first name, Justice Louis Brandeis, about sunshine being the greatest disinfectant. People are going to trust government when it's transparent.
Are you going to propose a bill again next session?
Absolutely. I've already met with the folks. I've tried to reach out to all those members, the ones I just already mentioned. We're going to expect to regroup in July, see where we go. I think we have a strategy with regards to, I can't tell you the strategy yet, but I don't want to get ahead. You can never tell your strategy. But I think we have a way to bring this back, and I've heard from folks subsequent to what didn't transpire is, yeah, well, we really need to do that.
As Tim says, look, we're reporters. Reporters always generally default toward wanting more open records, more easier access, bills like this. But I try to listen closely to the arguments on the other side. And the one thing that comes up constantly, pushback from inside, especially the executive branch, which has to deal with it, is we don't have the time and the resources to go through all the documents that get requested. We don't have enough lawyers to look through the redactions, et cetera. Like, you know, we need a lot more people if we were going to be as open as Senator Palma's bill would ask us to be. What do you say to that specific argument, the resources argument?
We have a fair number, maybe a lot, of public information officers in many of the state agencies. I don't agree with that statement. The other challenge we have looking at this is, so this is statewide. We're not just looking at state government, it applies to all open records, so it's municipalities as well. If we become a culture and an operation of state government and local government to just make stuff available when it becomes available, we don't have to worry about doing it. Here comes Ted Nesi again. He's going to come be asking for this and asking for that. And we've seen stuff before where I want information about Joe. I'll leave the real name aside, but I don't get the name for Joseph. Or I get an email from Tim, who sent it to Ted, two different agencies. So I get both emails, and I went through 600 or 700 of them for a particular one. One obliterates the document. The other one,
obliterates, meaning redacts.
Redacts. The other one gets rid of the email and the phone number.
So we're running short on time, and I do have to ask you about the Senate President. He missed a lot of the session over health concerns. You've been up there since 2009, Chairman.
Yes.
How did it change the dynamic in the chamber?
In fact, I've thought that over time. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a Yankee fan. So also puts in the context.
And yet you're still on the show, but continue.
Yes, that's good. And the Yankees, I think, are the best team in baseball right now. And they've missed players throughout the season.
All right, get to the question.
Okay. But let's go back to the Celtics. When the Celtics continue to lose players, and what do? They regroup. If you look at the Senate, and I'll call it a Senate family, and we really are, people stepped up. People did things that they wouldn't necessarily do before. And while the Senate President wasn't there physically, from a budgetary perspective, he and I spoke on a very regular basis. We were texting on a very regular basis. His chief of staff. We would talk every morning. At times I would say, I almost want you're going to be the first voice you hear in the morning and the last voice you hear at night. And we would talk all hours of the day and night. So from a dynamics perspective, the chair stepped up, and many other people did things that they probably wouldn't have done in the past.
From talking to him, do you think Senate President Ruggiero will be able, he's said over and over he's going to run for re-election, come back next year. Do you expect him to do that?
Absolutely. I think the timing now is right for him to continue improving on his health and move forward from there. He said he has nothing to do and all day to do it. So I think he'll have time to be able to get more healthy.
Senate Finance Committee Chairman Lou DiPalma, thanks so much for joining us on the program.
You're welcome.
When we come back, Ian Donnis from the Public's Radio and Nancy Lavin from the Rhode Island Current for a Reporters Roundtable. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi for our Reporters Roundtable. We welcome back Nancy Lavin from the Rhode Island Current and Ian Donnis from the Public's Radio. Thank you both. Like I said, to the chairman for coming in. It was a late night. And actually, I want to start there. We always expect the last night of the legislative session to go late. I think, what did this wrap up, 1:30?
Yeah. 1:32 this morning.
But it used to be even later. It used to be even more of a grind. What's changed over the years?
I think House Speaker Joe Shekarchi has had a big impact on the legislative culture. We saw the House budget debate, which, as you said, Tim, used to go to 2, 3 in the morning, wrapped up around 6:30 a week ago. And that's a better way to do the public's business. You know, some habits die hard. The last night still did go fairly late. There was still a chicken coop and an auto body bill or two. But I think there's a lot more good feeling in the House of Representatives under Shekarchi, and that accrues some public benefits.
I also think you have to give the Republicans a lot of credit. You know, sometimes we, obviously the Republicans are few in number in or around General Assembly, but a couple of years ago, then Minority Leader Blake Filippi said he would no longer suspend the rules. And this is one of those arcane things that led to a lot of chaos, because when you suspend the rules, they could do basically anything in the final days. Pop a bill right out of committee immediately and send it straight to the floor. That led to a lot of chaos. Once the Republicans said they would not go along with that anymore, it kind of forced the Democratic legislative leaders to, kind of clean up the process, smooth it out. And frankly, I think in some level, the Democratic legislative leaders liked the Republicans saying that, because they could tell everybody, sorry, I can't do your bill at the last minute. We don't do that anymore.
Nancy, so session's over, the bills that passed, presumably, I don't know if there's any bills that the governor might veto. I haven't heard that, but he signs the bills, they become law. Are there any that you're watching to see how they work in the next year?
Oh yeah, I mean, so many. I think
What's your favorite?
Well, one that we all have written about a lot in the sort of final weeks of session is this tax change that is ostensibly, even though it's not admitted maybe as openly, to benefit Citizens Bank, changing the way that bank taxes can be calculated, saving Citizens Bank some money so that they don't leave their Rhode Island headquarters and pick up their 4,200 person payroll in Rhode Island and go across the border to Massachusetts, where they have already agreed to do this tax change. However, it did pass in both chambers, pretty strong support, a few detractors, but one thing that even supporters have acknowledged is that there is no guarantee, just because we're doing this change that citizens wanted, that Citizens is going to stay. And from a financial services perspective, like Rhode Island is not a financial services hub. New York or even Boston make more sense. All of Citizens' sort of corporate people have 617 Boston area codes. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and just what happens, how that influences how lawmakers react to what they voted.
What happened behind the scenes there? We had last week on the show, we had Patrick Anderson from the Providence Journal, and he said, the progressives were able to make the corporate welfare argument, and then all of a sudden, whiplash, the thing passed.
That's the precise word I was thinking of, Tim, because it was taken out of the budget, and then a couple of days later, after Speaker Shekarchi said he's not going to be the speaker who lets citizens leave the state, there was this widely supported effort to make this change. I think clearly it's important that citizens, it's an economic force, it's a lot of jobs. I think lawmakers recognize that. There was some comment from public officials. This discussion had been going on since late last year, but it did not emerge from Governor McKee's office as a budget amendment until late in the session, and that had raised a lot of kind of questions and perceptual things about it.
The other bill that got through, and I guess I was a little surprised. I'm not as much of a General Assembly watcher as the three of you are. But the accessory dwelling unit bill that is near and dear to the House Speaker's heart was right up to the wire in the Senate. It was even relatively a close vote. What was it, 22-15? Okay, thank you, in the Senate. Why did it take so long to get through, Ted? I mean, what was the opposition in the Senate, and why was it so close?
Well, I think, the Senate clearly, first of all, I'd almost flip the emphasis here and say, why did it get through? Because of the House Speaker, period, right? When you see a Senate vote that close, if this was not the top priority bill for the House Speaker, I don't think the Senate leadership is going to bring it up to a vote, because they clearly had to, twist some arms to get a majority for this bill there. And so I think you see here that it does matter who holds these jobs, for better and worse, depending on what your position is. But, who the individual person is and what they prioritize. In this case, Joe Shekarchi prioritizing the housing crisis, and when there's horse trading, the horse he wants is the ADU bill.
So in other words, the Senate can use it as leverage.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure they did behind the scenes. But I think I think the senators, I think you saw Victoria Gu, who was the leader. Nancy wrote a great piece about this on the ADU side on the Senate. I think she represents Charlestown in part. Westerly. She represents that part of the state. And you've heard a lot from planners in that section of the state who really don't want a lot of housing expansion, say they can't handle the influx of permits and all of that. So I think, it's a good reminder, people, as much as we talk about everyone agrees the housing crisis, there are a lot of pockets of resistance to statewide efforts to just make it easier to build.
All right, we're going to take a break on the program, but when we come back, we're going to talk about something that has flown under the radar but is pretty important, and that's the situation at Roger Williams and Fatima Hospital. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Joining us for a reporters roundtable, Ian Donnis from the Public's Radio and Nancy Lavin from the Rhode Island Current. Ian, you've done a lot of reporting on the drama with Roger Williams and Fatima Hospitals. This week, Judge Brian Stern, the Superior Court, ordered Prospect, the owner of those hospitals, to cough up $17 million in outstanding bills to its vendors. Prospect is warning of bankruptcy. This is, though, has sort of flown under the radar, but it's a big deal. It's a real big deal. It hasn't gotten as much public attention as perhaps the failed merger between Care New England and Lifespan. But Roger Williams Medical Center and Our Lady of Fatima are among the largest employers and biggest taxpayers in their respective communities, Providence and North Providence. So if they were to go bankrupt, that would have a big economic... We should say that's because Prospect is a for-profit, so as a nonprofit, they'd be off the tax roll. That's right, and it would have a dramatic spillover effect on the rest of healthcare. And there's a proposal to sell them to an Atlanta-based nonprofit, the Centurion Foundation, but that proposal is very controversial because Centurion wants to finance its deal with a lot of debt based on the hospitals. The main union at the hospitals opposes that deal, and we're expecting a decision on that any day now. Attorney General Peter Nerona told me recently that there's no guarantee, even with the nonprofit takeover, that the hospitals would not go bankrupt. Wow. And I mean, we should point out, these are safety net hospitals, Ted. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly surprised it's not getting more attention from state leaders. We're not hearing more about the situation with these two hospitals. We just saw not many years ago what happened when Memorial closed in Pawtucket. Again, a step many people thought would never happen. And that was with a more, frankly, civic-minded owner in Care New England. Prospect, I don't think, cares a lot based on their actions about the underlying health of these two hospitals. Nerona agrees with you. Nerona very much agrees. And so, I certainly hope they don't go bankrupt for the sake of the patients and the people who work there, and I don't want to be alarmist, but I also think, you hope somewhere there's more contingency planning being done. But certainly if you listen to Nerona, he doesn't believe that's happening, which makes you worried about what would happen down the road if something bad really occurred. All right, let's get back to the General Assembly, Nancy. Looking ahead to next session, there are a lot of bills that didn't pass. They get held for further study, which is at the end of a session, a death sentence. What could reemerge? What do you think could come up again? Oh, everything. One thing that I'm sure will come up, because it always does, but may potentially advance next year, is payday lending reform. So cracking down on these financial services companies that offer these high interest, low dollar loans with a really short repayment cycle. Right now they can charge up to 360% interest. Most states and federal requirements have cap at 36%. Yeah. This has been a push for like decades and decades. Not gotten much traction generally. It did get a vote in the House last year, no votes in either chamber this year. However, a bunch of the advocates circulated a petition that got signed by the Attorney General's office, the Treasurer's office, and the governor. And the head of one of those groups, the head of the Economic Progress Institute, Wyona Nelson Davies, has really been vocal in going after the people that she blames for not passing
one person in particular,
which is the Senate President
and
also the lobbyist for one of these payday lenders. Bill Murphy is the former House Speaker. Former House Speaker. So it's almost an Attorney General-like approach to social media, like, really hammering him, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out next year, I think. And especially how it plays out in terms of the future of the Senate President. We talked to the chairman on the first half of the show about the health concerns with the Senate President. you have been covering the General Assembly for a long time. Did it change the dynamic up there with him being absent for so long?
I think it did. No one can really deny that. And there are just more questions. I mean, I think Dominic Ruggiero is approaching the end of his time in public office, even if he wins re-election as Senate President in January after the election season. But one other issue where he is the impediment to change is the proposal to ban new sales of semi-automatic military-style so-called assault rifles. We've seen a lot of changes on gun laws in recent years in the General Assembly. That would have never happened even with the Democratic supermajority, but the legislature has moved a little bit more to the left over the last decade with more lawmakers who favor the so-called gun safety argument.
And I've now been a reporter at the State House long enough to know anytime you swap out one of the big three, the governor, speaker, and the Senate president, you can have bigger changes than maybe you expect. Because while the General Assembly is a bit of a battleship, there's a lot of underlying interests that don't change regardless of who's in charge. Let's go back to what we were talking about in the last segment, ADUs. I just don't think that's happening right now. If if Speaker Mattiello was still in place or someone else had replaced him as speaker, and as Ian says, I think with Senate President Ruggiero, certainly we all hope his health does improve, and he has every intention of coming back. But as Ian says, at some point he will be done. Everybody is. And who replaces him, which has its own uncertainty now, which is a little unusual, could have big implications depending on what their priorities are. And for some of these bills where Ruggiero has been particularly opposed and able to block it in his chamber.
Got a little over a minute left. Ted, I asked Nancy what she will be watching in terms of a bill that becomes law over the next year and how it works. What are you watching?
ADUs, I know I keep talking about it, but I just, is it overhyped, right? That's the question for me. We saw California allow more ADUs in recent years. They have seen quite a bit of housing stock growth from adding these, whether they're in-law apartments, little standalone living units on a property. But, we also know that there's a lot of opposition to housing growth in Rhode Island. That's an obvious statement. And so how this is implemented, does it have a big effect? I'm very interested to see that. And then, frankly, I'm just interested to see who wins the Assembly elections this fall. We have seen the Assembly move a little to the left in recent years. Even though you see some things that don't pass assault weapons, payday loans, there is no doubt both chambers are further to the left than they used to be, even though there's been a D next to almost everybody's name for all these years. So what happens after this?
So, Ian, we have, in 30 seconds, there was a lot of Yankees talk on the first half. Do you have anything to say about the Red Sox?
Well, it's been a tough time to be a Red Sox fan.
Indeed.
John Henry seemingly does not need to spend much money to still draw more than 32,000 people to Fenway Park. We are. But I'll be watching the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights bill. That was one of the big issues at the legislature this year.
All right, guys, we got to go. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the program. By the way, a substance called kratom passed in both chambers and it's going to become law. It's now legal in Rhode Island. If you want to learn more about it, we have a whole write-up on the Target 12 section of WPRI.com. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.